Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to talk in this video a little bit about how much due diligence, time, energy, and effort I had to put in to uncovering all of these long-term crimes against me, who's all been involved, what's at the root of all this, and how I got things to where they are today. Because the amount of due diligence that I had to do, I have been digging for about 7 years. And the first 5 of those 7 years, I was gathering information and evidence in person. And the last 2 years or so, I've been gathering a lot of the information and evidence paperwork wise. Now, if you notice the thumbnail of the picture, that is part of the missing stolen trust fund that belongs to me. That is one of the pages of it. So I have located some of this documentation. I have located a lot of documentation and a lot of pieces of paper and evidence that tie back to all of these crimes. And the reason for all of the crimes is so all these people can get their hands on the missing stolen trust fund that belongs to me. Now, where this became a thing for me to start digging was about I'd say in 2019, because I couldn't really start digging in 2018. But at the beginning of 2018, when my brain first swelled and I died and came back after being dead for 4 hours in my bed, the very first memory I had when I came back was being at the reading of the will after the funeral when the trust fund was left for me. Because I stayed so close to death for so long and I didn't know if I was going to live and I couldn't get treatment and I was in such extreme physical distress, physical pain and suffering, and a child suffering from the same, I couldn't address any of this. And I didn't have all of the memories, but a good chunk of the memories came back immediately upon me returning. So sometime in 2019 is when I finally started to gather evidence in person, minimally paperwork wise, but the majority of it was in person because of what was going on around me. And what it was is my mother had tried to make sure I didn't survive my injuries and my son didn't survive his injuries, because what it states in the trust is that she would be allowed to collect on it if I were deceased. Well, because she's already hidden it and stolen from it previous to this, when it should have been given to me a long time ago, she saw an opportunity to finish taking me out so she could access what was left. So immediately upon those injuries becoming very extreme, and I was already near death, but the reason the injury even happened and the reason I was in the building in the first place was due to her escapades and harassment and crimes in the first place in 2013 and me rebuilding from that. She then inserted herself in different situations while we were seeking emergency medical help and when she was still working in the Beaumont system as a Beaumont hospital employee. So that's how she was able to get false information entered into our medical files using other employees to do it for her. And she did that with the intention of making sure I didn't survive so she could get access to the missing stolen trust fund. So going forward, I stayed in such an extreme state for so long and just barely alive, barely able to get from room to room in my house. I couldn't do anything about any of this for some time. But in 2019 is where people started appearing in my life, and she started sending people to my work to gather information on me, gather evidence on me, and send them to insert themselves into my life to cause problems or take me out. But what she didn't realize is how close to death I truly was, and I had no quality of life. I wasn't going anywhere. I should have never been working, and I was barely getting there and back the few times that I did work prior to COVID. So there was none of that was ever going to go on. I couldn't physically go anywhere with anybody. So she misconstrued the level of the injury and how serious it was, although she did know it was serious, which is why she prevented treatment. But by this time, I had already found the private center and began treating at the private center and was for some time. And as this was going on, more and more of the memories were coming back, what was going on, and pieces of being at the funeral, being left the trust, this is where some of this was coming back. And at the same time, people were inserting themselves into my life, showing up at my work, following me near my house or sitting by my house, watching and gathering information. And she was also, she was working numerous angles, still trying to make sure I didn't survive and manipulating my dad and my kids and repeating so many delusions to them that caused me to be in even further extreme physical distress because my brain was in a continuous state of swelling with no proper medical treatment or rest or recovery. So during that time, she was creating even more chaos. It wasn't tolerable to live in a state like that. And due to that, it was causing 911 to be called and CPS to be called. And she's at the root of all of that because behind the scenes, she was calling my city's police department as well. And there are certain officers who have participated in these crimes against me in my city in Flat Rock, Michigan, which began at that time. So a lot of this was going on in person. And she also had my dad drop off a tote full of different things that she had stolen from several of my houses after she convinced my dad to give her keys to some of my houses, that she stole from my houses because I was not there when this happened. And some of it was stuff from when I was a teenager that she stole out of my room because I never had privacy ever. She went through my room every day and she stole stuff out of my room. And a lot of the stuff that was taken over the course of these times she did all this showed up in this tote. And in there was actually some of the evidence of what she was doing and the things she was orchestrating behind the scenes, some of the things she was participating in. She wasn't aware that I was already aware something was going on. And she sent my dad to drop that off here. So it was more physical evidence that was brought directly to me. And in that tote, there was some information about sending me off to some school far away in a different state, when I was still, I think I was 16 or 17. And she had called my friend's mom at that time and told her some information regarding the matter. And even at that time frame, all those years ago, my friend's mom started questioning me about how much money my parents made because it didn't make sense because this was not something they could have afforded to pay for. So this was the first red flag, and the information regarding all of that was actually in that tote that my dad dropped off here in 2019. And now at the same time, I'm going through treatment daily. My memories are coming back. I was just still in such an extreme state of distress that I couldn't really do anything about it. And then I'm forced to was forced to accommodate the harassment during all this while I was just still fighting to stay alive. So I just kept gathering the evidence. And this is when I brought in Charmaine and brought her some of this evidence that physically showed up at my house. And I told her what was going on. And I told her how I had died and came back. I lost my memory. I was initially left untreated. I'd finally found the private center. I'd been treating for about a year at this point. And I was really far away from where I needed to be, still didn't know if I was going to live. And she saw me go through all of this firsthand. So she is still involved today, and it's been over 6 years. And she's watched all of this play out every step of the way. And then she also had the same questions when those school documents showed up, which she was also trying to do behind my dad's back, because that's when we flipped through the documents. And when it asked for the father's information, everything stopped because she was doing this behind his back. And in all actuality, she was going to pay for this with my missing stolen trust fund. Now, I believe she was probably going to make my dad pay for the majority of it and maybe chip in a little bit of it. And she was intending on pocketing all of the money that she siphoned from the missing stolen trust fund. But as time went on, COVID happened, and more harassment, more crimes, more 911 and CPS calls, more problems with the people in my household. And the whole point was to make sure that I'd either be arrested or I'd end up deceased, or she was trying to get my kids in her possession, get my kids taken. And this was all due to the missing stolen trust fund. So a lot of that was going on. And then upon returning to work after COVID in 2021, that's where all of this heightened, where all of these people had infiltrated my life in every which direction, every angle, every aspect of my life. And it turned into at least 10 to 20 people at any given time participating in this everywhere I turned. So at that point, I knew something was very extreme. It was very extravagant. And I just kept gathering the information and talking to the people who I then was red flagged just upon talking to them because of things they said or their behavior, or a lot of it was things they assumed. A lot of these people, most of them, had made a lot of assumptions about me, and none of it was ever reality. So that's how I knew they were involved in this. And I continued to talk to each person to continue to gather the information. So those first 5 years, that's what I was doing. When I returned to work after COVID, the little bit that I was working, I was able to gather the information a little bit better and get through each day a little bit better. However, I was still undergoing almost daily treatment still. And I had a ways to go, but I was at least in a more comfortable place where I wasn't in such extreme distress. And I continued to gather the information from all of these people. Um, Now, at that point, many more people had inserted themselves into my life, started showing up at my work, many different angles. I just kept talking to these people or listening. I was in an extreme state of hypervigilance, and I just kept gathering the information. So by the time 2022 rolled around, that's when I started to try to seek help from the FBI and numerous agencies to bust the entire thing open. Now, because I didn't have any actual documentation in my hands at that time, all I had was the story and what happened, basically my entire life up until that point. They directed me to start gathering even more information, even though I had already been doing so. They directed me on what to do next, and so I then followed those steps. I tried numerous times from that point to today to get an agency involved to bust the entire thing open, and I was unsuccessful because nobody wants to believe something this large scale or long term is going on, and that all of these law enforcement officers and all of these people with power are involved in all of this, even though I have the proof that they are. So when I tried seeking help again later down the line, I did have some of this proof in my hands, and I still was not able to get anywhere. And I already knew I was going to be filming these videos back in 2018. So I didn't start filming them until mid 2024, and I didn't start releasing them till January of 2025. So I've been filming them all along, but I had been gathering the information since 2018, 2019, all in person. Most of this stuff was in person. And there's a lot of videos up on all of this already on the things I was doing and the things, how I was gathering the information and the different people involved in this. And then once the damage to my house happened at the end of 2023 and I came back to start the work at the beginning of 2024, that's when I started gathering everything paperwork wise from all these different agencies and organizations. So I started digging. I started looking for the missing stolen trust fund. Along the way, at some point, it dawned on me what was actually going on, because the rest of my memories slowly returned. And the last few memories came back after I was placed back in my home in complete silence and basically removed from the outside world and all of the chaos and all of the harassment and everybody following me around, because the damage to the house was so extensive that it took me a little over 2 years to get the majority of it done. And it was a lot of work in itself, and it was a lot of work doing the paperwork, getting the money for it. And so I was no longer able to work because of the damage to the home, which was actually a blessing in disguise, and what caused the rest of my memories to return. And it allowed me the time and the energy and the effort to put in to keep digging for further information and putting the rest of the pieces together, because at this point I had tons of information and evidence. So that's where I started putting everything together. Several years back, I did meet a friend down in Ohio, and he's an engineer. He's really smart. And it's hard to find people who are like-minded, equal to me, because I'm just on a different level all around, and I'm self-made, self-built, self-taught, and I have an extreme degree of knowledge in many different areas. And once I told him what was going on regarding this matter, it was something he said that actually opened my eyes to realize that everything I've been dealing with my entire life, all these escapades, all these financial wipeouts, all these false arrests, CPS chasing me, all these problems, all the kidnappings of my kids, what it all had to do with was the missing stolen trust fund. And it was something he said that made it click for me, and realized that every step of the way from the time the money was left for me. So this was the early 1990s. It was 1991, actually. So now I have some of the papers. It was 1991. So if you look at the thumbnail, it's on there. And from that day all the way to the current day, that's what's been going on, because my mother intended on this money going in her pocket from the minute it was left for me. But it was literally his words that helped piece everything together. It took somebody who had never heard of such a crazy situation, who had a fresh perspective and an outside view, to look at it from a different angle and say, that's a lot of time and wasted time and energy and effort that not just one person, but many people are putting into this. Why would so many people be doing something like that? So along the way, as the memories were coming back and the pieces of evidence and people were telling on themselves, and all of this kind of came together, I then realized that's what was at the root of everything. Because I do remember being at the funeral. I do remember my name being called at the end of the funeral. I remember my mother getting extremely excited, and uh, and I didn't even really understand what it meant. I just wanted my name to be called because I thought it was cool. And she was excited because she intended on the money going to her immediately. So we attended after the funeral. We spoke to the attorney in the office, and she left my dad outside of the room talking with other people. So she went in there. They explained to her what I was left, and then when we came out, she lied to my dad about what was left for me. So going forward, she created so much chaos that he never remembered anything was even left for me. And um, going forward, that's where she also became extremely abusive and caused all these problems and all this chaos, all this destruction, all these wipeouts. She orchestrated these events and these incidences to happen along the way from that day forward, all the way to the current day. Because everything I'm dealing with today in 2026 in the current day, it's all fallout from all these escapades and crimes. And I am left permanently injured from my injury, which initially happened 10 years ago and became extreme past the point of no return 8 years ago. So I'm dealing with all of that in the current day, and my life came to a dead stop about 2 years ago, also. And there's no way to pick up the pieces without arrests being made and all of this being exposed. So, because the escapades and the harassment and everything amplified once my injury happened, the amount of that and how much it amplified was also part of the clues and telling on herself for what she was doing and what all these people were doing and what was actually going on. So, I just began piecing everything together. I began putting myself in quite a bit of few risky situations, I guess you could say. I'm a little more like intelligent than that. It wasn't as risky to me as it would be the average person for numerous reasons. I'm not going to talk about all those reasons, but um, it may seem extremely risky to somebody looking up from the outside, but I was fully aware of certain things and I have a certain degree of knowledge. And um, there's just several factors involved at why I chose to put myself at such risk to take this on and gather this information myself. And I knew there was no other way to go about it. So I continued to do that. And that also made the people involved in this believe that I was just naive and I had no idea what was going on when I knew 100% of the time, and I just never told anybody. So I'll talk more about this in the future once it all comes out fully and I'm able to talk about some more of these circumstances down the line. But also during 2021 is when my mother brought somebody in to become me. And there's her and a guy that she's with that it's not like on any social media sites publicly, but I do know these two are together and they are involved in a bunch of different like crime situations. Like they have a couple different scam things that they pull with on many levels with many people. And that's who the two of them were sent into my life to. He was sent into my life to try to take me out or take over what I've worked for. And then he intended on bringing her in to become me and take over as me. These people were brought in by my mother and her criminal group. And then she followed me around for 2.5 years and had many people also helping her, just basically picking up on how I operate, mimicking my mannerisms, taking over my looks and turning herself physically into me, and then purchasing the same car as me, taking over how I make my money, going to the places I work at and taking over and spreading a lot of lies and delusions about me there. So I would have a lot of trouble making money and I'd have all these problems. And still, the intent was to kill me, to get rid of me, and take over my life one way or another, whether it was her or the guy that she's truly with behind the scenes, but nobody's aware of. I have evidence that it is, and the two of them are able to be located today. So I don't know the guy's name, but I would be able to locate them with some simple help from the authorities. And there is proof of this as well because there is a body cam footage of several officers down in Ohio who basically I got pulled over on a high-speed chase in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. And I intended on holding her at gunpoint until I got her real name and who hired her and what she was doing. And this had been going on for over a year at the time this happened. And the police caught us before it got to that point. And then I told them everything as soon as we got pulled over, and they were able to pull in numerous officers and see what was going on and could verify everything that I said was in fact true. We didn't have the full picture or the answers, or that they were actually tied to my mother. So this was the beginning stages of uncovering all of that. So I am going to try to get the footage to the police video of all this, because you can very clearly see. But they intended on presenting her as me and getting access to the rest of the missing stolen trust fund, and accessing it and splitting it numerous ways, and probably whoever brought the two of them in on this. But it did not work with how that guy thought he was going to insert himself into my life and take over what I've worked for and or get rid of me. It didn't work that way because I'm not who they thought I was. And I was red flagged immediately. That's why I went out with the guy a couple times to gather the information. Now, going forward, there was many other people who were also attempting to do this. Shortly after that, Tony Baloney came into the picture, and part of the reason that she kept getting all these criminal charges put on me, how my mother was getting all these criminal charges put on me from the time I was a teenager to the current day, is because it states in the trust that the money can be used to fight criminal cases. So that's the reason for all the false arrests, all the police harassment, all of the falsified police reports, and all of the almost charges that have almost happened. That's the reason for all of that. And all the cops who've written those reports, they've all participated in this. And what it is I was stuck fighting these charges all on my own every step of the way. And she took these charges down to the attorney's office holding the trust, and they'd give her a chunk of money each time this happened throughout the course of the last 25 years or so. So she's pocketed money every step of the way doing that. And then when I attended Dorsey Business School, she pocketed the money for all of that. They probably gave her extra for that. And then I took on the student loans, and the payment was very small over a 10-year period, but she eventually slowly paid it off so she could get that large sum of money to herself. And then along the way, she also presented herself to have custody of my older two kids for about 20 years. And she slowly brought, it's not actual proof. She orchestrated certain things to happen where she'd have like little tiny bits of like what you would call proof, but it's not real proof because there is no proof. She didn't raise my kids. She didn't have custody of them. That's why she wanted braces on my oldest son's teeth. That's why she wanted my daughter to make her communion and get baptized so she could use those documents. Because she told these people that I had ditched my kids a couple decades ago and ran off, was nowhere to be found, and she'd been raising them with no legal documentation. And this is the reason the cops also helped her kidnap my children numerous times over the course of all these years. This is also the reason CPS was being used and called on me, and my kids were being threatened to be taken all these times. And that began about 21 years ago. That was the reason for all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave the links to the timeline of all of these events starting in the late 1980s leading up to the current day. There's 2 videos on those. I'm going to leave the links down below in the description box, and I'm also going to leave the link to the video that talks about all the different agencies and people who've been involved in all these crimes against me all these years. And I'm going to leave those 3 links in the description box because it ties into everything I'm saying and what's been going on, because this has literally been nonstop from the day the trust was initially left for me. Now, because of the amount of digging and paperwork and research and everything I've been doing the last couple of years, after having all this physical proof and all this stuff I gathered in person, I was able to dig and dig and dig. I know how all these different systems and agencies work. I know how things are intertwined. I know how things work in the world to a very extreme degree. So because of my level of knowledge with all that, I was able to uncover numerous sets of documents and trace things backwards to many different avenues. So that's what I've been doing very heavily the past 6 weeks or so. And it's really been over 2 years, but very heavily the past 6 weeks. I have gathered so many documents that I'm very close to closing in on all of these people who have participated in all of these crimes against me. Like I said, I have proof of everybody I've mentioned in the videos that they've participated. And there's even more than what I've mentioned in the videos. I haven't even gotten to some of this yet. But I do have enough proof for arrests to be made. And where I'm going with this is arrests are going to be made. My mother will be spending the rest of her life in prison, and the top tier level of individuals who participated in this with further investigation and looking to arrest the other individuals that are at the lower tiers of all of this. But the top tier needs to be taken out first, along with her. And because of the amount of evidence I have and the reality of my actual life, because I'm the exact opposite of who she's portrayed me to be, She was basically have to pay back everything she's taken from me. All of the people who've taken payments from this, everything is going to have to be paid back with interest. And I have enough proof of this. So that's where I'm going with things. And my proof is the thumbnail in this video, because that thumbnail is a piece of the trust document. So I'm not going to say anything beyond that about what I have and what I've acquired. It doesn't matter if you want to try to take me out the way you've been trying to do. And it doesn't matter, because it's still all going to come out, and there's other people with copies of this. So it's still not going to work, even if you manage to get your hands on me, which has not been able to happen at any point during this. So I am narrowing everything down. I am closing in on all of these individuals involved. And these people will be apprehended if it's the last thing I do. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, you're going to realize that I work directly for God himself. And I realized that shortly after I died and came back the first time. And I began being placed in situations where I was forced to uncover crimes that are going on and presented in different people's lives to see what decisions they would make. And all of these people made the wrong decisions, except for, I think, one person. And now I knew that all along. So that's the whole reason this has all been going on. I've known for a long time this is what I was sent here to do. I follow the messages. I do as I'm told. I take steps regarding how I receive these messages. I cannot control it. And I was already spiritually gifted before I was ever even injured. It just became amplified after my injury. So that's what's been going on and how I got led to each step of the way. It was truly in 2019 where everything just slowly started coming out in numerous ways. And I received quite a few messages in that year and 2020, which helped bust everything open fully. And I've just been working on this the entire time, on top of everything else I've been forced to juggle and deal with. And it won't be much longer before I fully expose everybody. And basically, arrests will be made very soon. And you know, the first person that needs to be arrested is my mother, and custody of my dad needs to be turned over to me. And the reason I've been banned from my dad for all this time is because of this missing stolen trust fund and all of these people attempting to get their hands on it, promising false fraud charges on me. And that was what they were trying to do. And none of it was ever real. And I have the proof of what's all been real. That's the whole reason I was banned from my dad. It's all due to these people trying to steal the money that belongs to me. So, that's the first thing that needs to happen, because I truly don't know how much time he has left. But these people are very sick, deranged, disturbed individuals, especially my mother. If you can't tell, her eyes are black. On top of it, she had to have I believe it was a cornea replacement. What it is she's been sending evil eye for all these decades, and she's responsible for making my dad blind. So her own karma finally came back and kicked her in the ass, or the face, or the eyes, whatever. And that's what's actually been going on regarding her. But there's a lot of people involved in all of this, and I'm sure they're experiencing some crazy stuff as well. But I promise you, the very last thing I'm going to be doing is making sure all of these people are apprehended for their crimes, charged for their crimes, and that I receive the money that was stolen from me, that I'm paid back, and justice is served. Now, because I've been doing this for so long, and I'm so deep into this, and I have so much information, it won't be much longer. I just need a little bit more time. And I promise you that is what's going to be happening. It doesn't matter if it doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't matter if, it's one arrest and then 3 arrests and then 10 arrests. Doesn't matter. It's all going to happen at some point. It's just because I'm only one person, and I'm fighting against a bunch of corrupt agencies and many individuals who've been involved in all of this for a very long time. So for me to be able to have that kind of time and energy to put into all this, it is going to take me some time. Now, because I've obviously already obtained some documents that prove everything I'm saying, and it proves the trust exists. And that is the motive for all of the ongoing crimes and harassment against me. All the financial wipeouts, 3 solid financial wipeouts from the time I was 18 years old, all the way down to nothing, having to rebuild from nothing, and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. That is also the reason I'm left permanently injured for the rest of my life. It also states in these documents that anything medical, that the money could be used for that. Now, I've already spent close to $200,000 out of pocket myself on my own treatments to keep myself and my son alive. So right off the bat, as soon as I find that money, regardless if anybody helps me or not, I will be finding that money very soon. And because I don't know all of the stipulations, but I do know that immediately some of this money would need to be turned over to me right away because of what I've already spent out of pocket and have receipts for. So there's a lot of things, a lot of pieces of information I do have. And the documentation I do have explains why everything that has happened to me has happened to me. So my mother orchestrated all of these events to happen every step of the way, making it look like I'm somebody that I'm not, so she could always gain access to this money. It was literally planned from the minute we were sitting at that funeral. And this is what she turned into a full-time job to make sure she would get access to the money. She's literally only made 30 grand a year her entire life. I think the last 2 years she made 35 grand a year. And the reason for that is because she's never had to work hard. She never had to provide. My dad paid all the bills. She had no responsibilities. And she turned this into a full-time job to make sure all of the money that was left for me went in her pocket so she wouldn't have to work, while I'm over here physically working my ass off for decades and provided everything I've worked for myself without help from anybody while being criminally harassed. So that's what she's been doing. I will do a separate video on how she's turned this all into a full-time job for herself. And it's because she intended on all of this money going in her pocket. So I am going to leave the links below that pertain to all of these people and the timeline of events and why all those things were happening was due to this trust fund and everything else that's happened. I will be back with more. Thanks. Bye.